and welcome to the first of our Conversations in Pubs, and a particular welcome to our celebrity guest, Marilyn Jones, who we're very spoiled that she's come out into the wilds of the country, even though there was a frost out here this morning, and given us the benefit of her life experience. And Marilyn is one of the major contributors to the arts and profile of Australian culture. So I think we must acknowledge that. I'm sorry you're a bit jammed in. We were to be upstairs, and next time we will be. But this room here is the original room of the Royal George, which is one of Kyneton's treasured buildings, heritage buildings. And also there's a tunnel from that fireplace that used to go to the next door house. So if any of you feel a need for escape, which you won't. So I'm Jill Rivers, and I've started these conversations to bring arts and culture into everyday lives. There's a current research project in the UK building factual evidence to prove that engaging in arts and culture builds an improved sense of well-being. So let's get on with it and all feel better. So you were a member of the Borobansky Ballet, the first classical company in Australia. And when the Australian Ballet grew out of that company, in 1962 became a foundation member of the Australian Ballet and went on to hold the reins of the company later on as artistic director in 1979 to 1982, and the list goes on with the things you've done. I don't know how you fitted them all in. So, and when I'm just giving you a little brief précis of some of the things that Marilyn has done during her career. And when she was awarded a Whitlam Fellowship in 1990, is that right?
Keating. It was Keating.
Oh, it's a Keating Fellowship.
Better get it right.
Absolutely. Instead of taking that money to further her own career, she founded the Australian Institute of Classical Dance, in which you're still very heavily engaged.
Yes.
And continues to nurture and develop the art form, and also particularly to preserve the repertoire, but also to nurture developing choreographers. And there is, every 2 years, there is a choreographic showcase which is coming up this year. Would you like to just explain a little bit about that now?
Yes. It's something we've been doing since about 1996, and this year it's evolved into a new concept, and so each state in Australia are running their own choreographic competition, and a choreographer is chosen from that state, and then we are bringing them to Melbourne. So the winners come to Melbourne, and they will perform at the Malthouse Theatre in October. And so it's quite exciting because each winner from each state, actually it's not a competition anymore. They're the chosen ones from each state representing their state. And we have a prize or an award for each choreographer. And that is the Australian Ballet Company are allowing one of the choreographers to do a work for Body Talk, which is a choreographic season they have each year. Stanton Welch, my son, has offered a choreographer to do a work for Houston Ballet 2 in Texas.
Of which he's the artistic director.
Yeah. Yes. And then Lee Swinson in Queensland Ballet Company artistic director, has done the same thing. Western Australia as well, plus Natalie Weir also in Queensland. So each, and also the Australian Ballet School, one of the choreographers will actually work and in, I think it's called Morning Melodies, to do a piece. So each choreographer gets the opportunity to actually do something with these companies, which is really quite unique, and they're hopefully it will evolve, that we have a couple of very exciting choreographers. So we fundraise and we try and manage to we will pay for the dancers from each state to come with the choreographer, and then they'll rehearse and perform. Then the winners, we will then help to get them to do whichever chosen one they're going to be with. I mean, the most expensive for us, of course, is Texas. We've got an airfare to get them there. So, yes, so it's a big thing, but that's the thing we're doing at the moment. Also in Adelaide, in October as well, we are running an International Ballet Award for dancers, and this is prize money. So I think the first prize is $10,000, and then it's reduced from there. So this institute tries to assist choreographers, dancers.
It's a fabulous contribution, because it's so hard to get new work to keep the art form developing, because most companies won't take that risk of having a new work that people don't know and people not buying tickets and losing money.
That's true.
So this is very important to allow them that opportunity into it, and particularly when they get the chance that Marilyn's organised for them to actually perform with an established company on a proper stage. You know, it's fantastic.
And actually, whilst we're just talking on that subject, I've put there some brochures because my son Stanton will be out. He's doing his production of Le Bayadere for the Australian Ballet next month, and he'll be out, and he's actually going to be, like I'm doing, he's going to be guest speaker as a fundraising event in Melbourne at Christine and Ricardo School, the Conservatoire of Ballet, have donated their studios for the event. So if anybody's interested in listening to him talk about his choreographic career and his role as an artistic director, and for young dancers that are interested in the Houston Ballet School, we send quite a few across to the school.
So you were regularly described as perhaps Australia's best classical dancer. What are your first memories of dance?
I started ballet and tap actually in Newcastle, where I was born, with a lady called Tessa Maunda, who is now just turned 90 actually. She's 90 years of age. And I started because I had short Achilles tendons, and an aunt recommended that ballet would help lengthen the tendons, which it did.
So you weren't walking properly?
I would wake up and walk on tippy toes, not because I wanted to dance, but because I couldn't actually put my heels down until I warmed up. So I went there, and Tessa had this, first a garage, her dad's garage in the back of the house. And then the father, I think, built from there. So it was really about this size all up that she produced over all these years. Lisa Pavan, who's about to take over the Australian Ballet School, Liz Dewey, who was the principal of the Australian Ballet, Frank Cruz, who else? Olivia Bell.
Robert Curran.
Was Robert from there?
Yes, evidently.
Guion. She produced fantastic dancers.
And Marilyn
all
Jones.
in this little tiny place in a local suburb in Lambton, Newcastle. Yes.
We used to say it was something in the water, because they also came from Newcastle and joined the company and became internationally known. It's quite extraordinary.
Yes.
It's just all the
well-known.
expertise of this particular teacher.
Yes, and yes, she's amazing. And even now I think she still coaches students. She doesn't have her own school anymore, but she still coaches students and still has that love of the arts. So my memory, that's how I started dancing. Yes.
And was she one of your major inspirers, do you think? Mentors and
She was a little bit terrifying, I have to say. But I think it just goes on YouTube, I'm not too sure I should say that. But she was very dedicated. And we used to she'd have a group of us, and we'd go down and take lessons in the summer school with Lorraine Norton, who was another fantastic teacher, an English teacher, who I actually ended up, when I was 15, I went to Lorraine Norton. And I used to travel there by train, and it was 2.5 hours there and back, 5 days a week.
That's real dedication.
And so the train, I'll never forget, I'm not all that keen on trains anymore, but the train would leave at 7:30, get there at 10, work all day in class and everything, then get the 5 o'clock train back. So I did that 5 days a week. And I actually enjoyed it. I was usually chatted to whoever sat next to me, and the flyer, it was called, the train, not like the trains today. I mean, you had service, you had your little tray they put in front of you, they come around with sandwiches and tea and coffee and magazines. Yes, and then from there I won a scholarship when I was 15 because both Tessa Maundra and Lorraine Norton were in Stedfords, and the City of Sydney Stedford it was the first time, it was called the Women's Weekly Scholarship, and it was £500. And in those days that was a huge amount of money. I was 15, and I can't remember what year that was, 1955. And I was lucky, and I won the scholarship. And one of the adjudicators was Dame Margaret Scott, who started the Australian Ballet School. So it's a link there.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, Marilyn?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to say what Dame Margaret Scott said at the time. The quote, sorry.
That's all right.
The quote was, she has all the physical qualities, lovely legs, long neck, beautiful face, and a quality about her. It's that quality that real stars have. So you were 15 years old, but you waited a year.
Yes. Well, in those days you went by ship, and my parents didn't want me to go with a chaperone who offered. They felt I was too young, and I was a bit upset because I was like raring to go to London and start at the Royal Ballet School. But then I waited and went when I was 16, and my mother went with me. And I'm telling you, I was homesick before we left Australia. We left the port in Sydney, and by the time we got to the Perth one, I wanted to go home. So I would never have survived at the age of 15. And so we went across, and that was an experience, that ship. Because there were 2 classes back in those days, first and second class. We were in second class. So you never actually got to the top deck. You were at a different level altogether. And it took, I think, 4 or 5 weeks to get there.
And what was it like when you got to London to be a dancer from Australia?
From Newcastle too.
From Newcastle, yes.
Yeah. It was quite, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I can't say I enjoyed it. My mother and I got a little bed sitter in Earl's Court, which is where a lot of Australians went in those days, probably still do. With the bathroom down the corridor and things like that. My mother, who'd never worked in her life, had to get a job, but she was a great seamstress, so she actually got a job in a theatrical place where she made costumes for film stars and all different theatrical people. And then she left after, I think, 6 months, came back home, and I went in to share with some of the other girls there. And then luckily, after 9 months, I actually got into the Royal Ballet Company. So I just turned 17.
Which is pretty amazing to be accepted after that short time in the school.
Yes, I wasn't expecting.
The major classical company in the world at the time. I mean, you won a scholarship to the major classical dance school, which is pretty incredible. So that was such a transition for you.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts at the time? I mean, what was your motivation? Your dream at the time?
Oh, my dream was of course, to get into the Royal Ballet Company. I mean, it was
in that one,
dream.
yeah.
And back in those days too, there was no Australian ballet school. There was no big schools in that sort of way. And there was the Borovansky Ballet Company, who I loved. but they used to break up, like they'd do a season, maybe 18 months, and then it would be out of work for 12 months until they reformed again. But anyway, so I got into the company, and the first thing, almost immediately, we did was to go overseas on a trip to the USA and Canada. So that was really quite exciting. There was a few other Australians, Robin Haig, who was another Australian girl that was in the company with me, that got in at the same time. And Brian Ashbridge was a New Zealander that was a principal artist then, who ended up with the Australian Ballet. Yes, my memories of that were it was 5 months of travelling.
Was your mother still with you at that time?
No, she was back in Australia. Yeah, and so I remember we started in New York, and it was really exciting. And the things you remember when you're in the Court of Ballet were when Margot Fontaine performed, the audience clapped so much, Sleeping Beauty went overtime, so we got paid extra. That was, it was like, oh, she's on, we'll get paid extra. Because, I mean, we paid something like £3 something, so a real thing. And then we travelled by train everywhere. So we performed, say, Philadelphia or wherever, and then after the performance we'd get on the train, and there were those carriages that were like sleeping berths, but they're all like long, so the junior ones were on the top bunk. We got paid extra for that too, being on the top bunk. And you close it up and you hear shuffle all through the night as they, whatever was doing, I don't know, but we used to laugh about that.
And you had to have your rest because you had to perform.
Well, that was it. You slept on the train, you got off to the next stop, off you went and performed. But it was a lot of fun, it was great. And but I got quite homesick because America reminded me a lot of Australia. And it was summer, and it was, yeah, I loved it. So I decided I wanted to come back home. I was still only 17. And so I wrote, or Brian Ashbridge, who wrote for me, to Edward Borovansky to see if I could audition for the company. And unfortunately they were in recess at the time. But anyway, I came back home. And then my career started after that again, but in Australia.
Well, Borrow, as he was known affectionately by everybody, told Bill Akers, who was his manager at the time, if Australia's going to have a Fontaine, this is a girl. He was wildly enthusiastic. I gather there's a painting of you he did on display at the Arts Centre at the moment.
Yes, I think it's just opened, yes.
On Saturday. It's called Showtime, I think, the exhibition.
Right.
And it says it's on until the 21st of September in Gallery 1. I don't know what Gallery 1 is at the Arts Centre, but you could call them and find out. Yeah. I wonder if it's the one just as you go in at street level. That has actually got a name, but they may mean that.
Yes, and there's one I think around the side too.
Oh,
so
maybe it's that one. Yeah.
I'm not sure, I haven't been.
You find it anyway easily by asking the information. What was it like? Was he one of your mentors too?
Yes, when I came back, because the Borovansky company was in recess, I ended up working with Robert Pommier, who was a Frenchman. He was with the Borovansky company, and he started a company of his own called Ballet Français, and he asked me to be his partner during that time in Sydney. And so I did that with, this little group of us performed there, and that's where Bill Akers actually saw me and suggested that I audition for Mr. Borovansky. And so I did, and his comment was, "Peter, you were so badly trained." And I was like, because I said I'd been at the Royal Ballet School, and I don't think he'd like that.
Did that make it worse?
Yes. Anyway, but then he took me as a soloist, so he didn't think I was that badly trained, I guess. Anyway, so I joined Borovansky Ballet in '59, and the program was The Sleeping Beauty. So he had me as down as a lilac fairy, if you know the ballet, and also as a cast, the fourth cast for Aurora, the main role.
The fourth cast?
Yes, there were 3 couples and I was the fourth cast. And so there were only 3 male principals, and I always felt bad because it was like, who wants to do it now with Marilyn? I have to say the worst one was my ex-husband, Garth, who was like, I don't want to do it again. So, but Ivanka Biagovic, one of the ballerinas at the time, was to open with Garth Welch. And she took sick after the dress rehearsal. So I was called to go in on the day of the opening to perform parts of it, like the Aurora, the Rose Adage, which is quite tricky, its balances, and J.C. Williamson's, who they were the ones who ran the company, had all their Sir Frank Tate all out in the auditorium to watch me to approve whether I was good enough to do the opening night. It was really scary. And so they approved. And I remember that night I was terrified and standing at the side of the wings, and Aurora has this entrance running across the back of the stage and on. And I was like, where's the other way to go? I was so petrified. And anyway, so I went on, and I had this smile that got glued to my face, absolutely glued, and I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't not smile, and so I did the whole act with this grin. And I remember one of the critics said, "Kitty, she smiles so much." I was just so scared. But that was the beginning of my career with the Borovansky Ballet Company.
Well, it's one of the tests, the big tests of classical ballet, isn't it? That
it's terrifying. Yes. Yeah. Terrifying.
So I can understand. So when Borrow died and the Australian Ballet was formed, you and Garth were sent to Europe for a year to broaden your experience?
Yes. Well, Borovansky died, and actually he was doing the painting. That painting he was doing for my parents for Christmas, but he died before he gave it to them. He died and Dame Peggy Van Praag came out, and she ran the Borovansky Ballet Company until it closed in, 1961, I think. Yeah. And then it was in the pipelines to try and get a national company, ballet company and opera company. And so it was thought that it would only be something like 6 months, and then we'd all regroup, thank you, regroup and start with under the Australian Ballet. So J.C. Williamson's actually gave Garth and myself a scholarship to actually go overseas to work for the 6 months, and quite a few dancers actually were on that ship going over to get work.
People coming back to the Australian Ballet, or just getting work?
Getting work overseas.
Yeah. Okay.
Barbara Chambers, Heather McRae, we all sort of travelled that way. And then it didn't take 6 months, it took much longer. And in the meantime, I auditioned in Garth. We auditioned for a company in Paris called the Grand Marquis de Cuevas Company, very famous company. And it was where Nureyev defected to, and he did that at the time. Garth and I were actually over there, and so we saw him perform Blue Bird, and it was interesting because he had just defected and he performed, and there were people in the audience that were screaming bravo, and there were people throwing stuff on stage because it was quite an interesting time, but people were not happy with him, and people were,
He wasn't easy.
No, but he was amazing. I mean, his jump was amazing, his elevation. And so when Garth and I auditioned, who sat there to watch us was De Laurent, who was the
he was there
artistic director, and Rudy, who was sat there like this, and I was like, oh my God, we're auditioning in front of Nura. So, yes.
But you got the highest, you were entered the company with the Premier Danseurs.
Yeah, Premier Dancer, which means...
Terrible pronunciation. Jill, go back and
That's all right. But it means first dancer, it means principal. And Garth was, I think, senior soloist. And I did, once again, Sleeping Beauty, and I actually danced with Nuran a few times during that period.
What was that like?
Oh, fine, yeah.
Is he a good partner?
Very good. He's just a little bit short for me.
Yes.
Or I'm a bit tall for him, I should say. When years later we did Don Quixote in San Francisco, and he, we were in rehearsal, and I finished. He said, "Do you mind if I peek around the corner?" He had a good sense of humour. Yeah.
Yes.
So it was a very exciting time. I loved the company, and we toured all around Europe, and then unfortunately it closed because the Marquis de Quavers, when he died, the money all came from his wife, Rockefeller.
Kind of like a private company, wasn't it?
Yeah, and all this money was just from this very rich woman. And then the Countess de Reeves then also tried to help, assist, but the company went broke. And at the same time, the Australian Ballet Company started. So it was like going from one to the other.
Well, the French critics loved you.
Oh.
I've got a quote here.
You've done your homework, Jim.
Well, very special person. You've had a special career. One of the quotes was, in 1962, one of the French critics, I don't have which paper, she's very cultured with a beautiful sensitivity, which I consider before anything in a prima ballerina. She dances marvellously, and everyone in the company loves her. And it was much talked about that you had opportunities that would have unfolded had you decided to stay in Europe, that you made
that's the second time, yes.
Oh, was that the second time? Yeah.
Because the company folded, and I came back to the Australian Ballet, and then I auditioned, not for myself, but I auditioned with another dancer, George Golovine, who was looking for work. Everybody was looking for work. He was auditioning for London Festival Ballet, which is now English National Ballet Company. And so I agreed to audition with him, and they took George into the company, but they also offered me a contract. So after 6 months with the Australian Ballet, I went back as a guest artist for 6 months, and that was when that occurred.
And in that photo, there is that photo of Ballet Imperial. By that time, Peggy von Prague was out with the company, and she said she'd never seen that you were pronounced. Vicky Simon, who reproduces the Ballerina ballets, said that you were perfect for it, and Peggy von Prague said she'd never seen another dancer do it so well.
I just saw it recently. It was just performed by the Australian Ballet, actually. And I was like, gosh, that's a difficult role. And Vicky Simon was out as well at the same time, just recently doing a Ballerina ballet for the Australian Ballet School's 50th anniversary. So I caught up with Vicky, and we had a coffee and reminisced about the old days. And now she actually, because my son runs Houston Ballet Company, and Vicky goes there and puts on ballets. She put on Ballet Imperial for Stanton just recently, a year or so ago. And so there's my son, and still Vicky doing the same ballet. It's like so many years later.
It's marvellous continuity.
Yeah.
Because for those of you you're not so familiar with the way the reproduction of these classical ballets works. So usually when somebody dies, they hand over, while they're still alive often, because they can't be in every place at the same time, they hand over the reproduction, the staging, to carefully selected people. And this person, Vicky Simon, goes all around the world when Ballerina ballets are going to be staged by companies and make sure that the dancers have the proper techniques and look and every detail.
Style.
Yeah, style.
And Vicky has certain ballets only that she does, and then there might be another one that has certain ballets.
Yes.
So that's how they keep them, in the style that they should be, and not, sort of lost.
Look, though it is easier now with that we have the digital records of the ballet than before, when it wasn't available on videos for dancers to study.
Yes.
You've danced all the major roles in the Australian ballet repertoire, breaking only briefly when you had Stanton in 1969. Are you able to say now which roles you enjoyed most?
Well, I'd have to say Romeo and Juliet, it's a real favourite. Lady and the Fool, Giselle. Yeah, I like most ballets actually. They were all a challenge, all different. Merry Widow was great when I was older. There was a couple I didn't like. Oh, Raimondo, yes.
Which didn't you like? Are you allowed to tell us?
No.
Might upset someone.
They're only short ballets.
Okay.
And I tell you which was fine. I hated doing, in Giselle, I hated when I had to do the role of Queen of Willies. I really didn't like it. And I used to go on...
Any reason why not?
Well, she was cold, and also you had to have a great jump, which I didn't have. The role didn't appeal to me. And I remember standing there before I burroed on saying, I just don't like this. But it put me in the right mood.
She's very steely.
So I can say that, yes. The choreographer, I think he's gone now, so yes.
But the interesting thing is that you took it as a challenge when you encountered roles like Fee, when you thought, and people thought weren't probably in your best interest. You took it as a challenge.
I did. And I loved it. I loved the role. And it's, and my son, who also has that in the repertoire, said, I can't picture you doing that role, but you can adapt to your own personality, I think, any role. And the reason it was a challenge was because there was I have high insteps feet. There was lots of runs on point, jumping on point, and lots of jumps. And so it was done for a soubrette originally, Nadia Narina, and she was the Royal Ballet Company that Frederick Ashton did up. So people thought of it more as a soubrette role, whereas they thought of me as Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake type. So
very old ballet. But is that characteristic of your personality, that you like the challenge?
I do like the challenge. Yeah. And even if somebody said, "Oh, don't try that," I'll say, "Yes, if it's in the that's the choreography, then I want to do that." Yeah. So I guess it's that stubbornness more than anything else.
Well, it obviously proved successful. So, when you went to the United States with the Australian Ballet, there were pretty amazing reviews too, with people like Anna Crisell, the New York Times critic, who's one of the most revered in the world. She's sort of God in terms of making these decisions about whether companies and particular dancers are worth seeing. She gave you a great review. And then later on, Catherine Sawley Walker, who's another of the key names in the dance world, or she was, in the London Daily Telegraph, said, possibly the most outstanding Australian ballerina, a classical dancer of great style and refinement with deep emotional commitment, particularly for your memorable performances. Was that Swan Lake or was that Sleeping Beauty?
So, sorry, who was this?
No, this is in London.
In London, it was the Merry Widow.
And Giselle too, she said.
Oh, okay. So that was before, yes.
Yeah, okay. And you've danced with all these great names, Fontaine, Nureyev, in the dance world. Nureyev was known as often changing the choreography to suit himself as he went along. Pas de deux, was that difficult? Or did he change it during the actual performance, or was it in rehearsal?
I think he would change it in rehearsal. He might change his own solo, but he didn't change Pas de deux.
Oh,
no.
That was just one of the myths that's put about all the dancing people in dance, you know, that he kind of because he is such a strong personality.
Mind you, I think if he didn't like you, I wouldn't. He could be a little bit difficult.
He did have strong
Yeah.
views about
Yes.
everything. Yes. So,
I was just going to say, just on a lighter note, maybe.
Yes.
When the Australian Ballet Company started, I should say, financially, the company split into two groups to help us financially, and one group would tour New South Wales and Queensland, do the country tours, the towns, and the other group would do Victoria and South Australia. And we would be in like town halls, halls that you had to clean. We had to, get our own costumes and do all that. And I usually got the northern tour, and it was really hot. And in those days, one of the rep was Lady in the Fool, and another one was Swan Lake Pas de Deux that I danced. And so when it was hot, because we had those, what do you call it in those days for the music?
what, like a tape recorder type?
Yeah, like a tape recorder, a spiel or whatever. Yes, and in the heat it would slow down. So you'd be doing dancing and they'd go, and they'd put their finger to try and keep the speed going to the right tempo. And there was what else? We had some funny times, and there was a chap, one of the dancers, and it was Lady in the Fool, not Lady in the Fool, 1 in 5, which was a ballet Ray Powell did. It was about 5 clowns, and one was a girl. Came off in the show, she was a girl. But this particular dancer was a little bit lazy, one of the male dancers, and so somebody gave him, I think it was something like Dexedrine or something, I don't know, but he jumped, and he went through the floor in this particular place. And he jumped and he went through the floor, and they danced around him. And at the end of the piece, they actually had to get a saw and saw him out. And that was they were fun. They were funny memories of those local tours. And I had an interview once, and I was with Warren de Maria, who was a lovely partner, and we'd been doing Swan Lake Act 2 for years, and I said to him, I've done this so many times, I could do it backwards. I forgot it that night. I was like, what comes next?
Is that your most nerve-wracking experience? Or are there particular ballets that you find more nerve-wracking?
Nerve-wracking, I guess, for me, were always at opening nights were always the most nerve-wracking. But Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake, and Ballet Imperial, I think, were probably the toughest because of the expectation,
Technically.
Yeah, technically.
Yes.
In Sleeping Beauty, it's the balances, and you have to balance. Swan Lake, it's the 32 fouettes that everybody expects. And Ballet Imperial, just that whole first scene is really tough. Yeah, so, but if you do them well, then you come off feeling great.
Well, in 1972, you were awarded an OBE and retired to have Damien. And correct me all the time if I'm wrong.
Yes, I have to think back myself. Yeah.
And then you became the director of the National Theatre Ballet School.
That's right.
And was that the same time that you were having sort of increasing your administrative experience you were on the theatre board of the Commonwealth Arts Council, the forerunner of the Arts Council today. So, and then you did go back to the company. At what stage, you were known in the company as Jonesy. At what stage did you become La Divina or La Divinia? I'm not quite sure which was it. Oh, you don't ever know. There is a book, a biography of Marilyn, written by a dance critic, which was published actually in 1971. And she says that Marilyn became La Divinia. I assume that was a well-known name. but maybe not so much to you.
No, not to me. Jonesy was quite well known. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very friendly.
Yes, yes. And somebody gave me a T-shirt that says, "I hate ballerinas." I'm never quite sure what that meant.
So, how did you manage to bring up your children during
Well,
all these long, demanding hours?
I was really lucky that my mother was a huge help. My father died when he was only 55, so my mother was living alone. And so when Garth and I separated, my mother came and lived with me and really helped me.
Yeah, it's an
Absolutely.
amazing accomplishment because there was no
Yeah.
workers' compensation or anything
No,
like that. And
it was tough if you had an injury because we danced with injuries because you didn't get paid if you didn't dance with injuries. So I've had that many cortisones in parts of my body to when I got older, I guess, so that I could continue to dance. So I could continue to put.
well, there was no maternity leave either.
No,
was there?
nothing like that. No.
So, how long did you have off when you had your babies?
With
From
Stanton,
dancing.
I took the whole time off, and then went back because I had to, according to the doctor, and then I went back quite soon after that, at least maybe 6 weeks. I started,
Gosh,
and then.
you must have had to work hard to get back
Yes,
in
I mean,
training.
I breastfed and did all that, but yeah, it wasn't easy. It was terribly hard. And the first thing I did was Don Quixote. I think I did Queen of the Dryads,
Oh.
Don Quixote. Yeah.
Very demanding technical role
And
too.
with Damien, I danced up until I was about 4 months, I guess.
You seem to work continuously.
I did. You make me feel sorry for myself now. I have to have a holiday, Jim.
Well, I mean, you did that work with the theatre school. You were artistic director of Australian Ballet, and then later in 2000, was it that you were in Perth at the
Whopper.
yes
Yeah.
at the Western Academy of Performing Arts.
Yes. Yeah.
And then your two sons, Stanton and Damien Walsh, have both become dancers. Stanton has had this amazing career because he's developed as a really exciting choreographer, and at one stage created a ballet for the Australian Ballet, which was dedicated to his mother, called Of Blessed Memory, which is pretty special. And there was a photo up there in the loop of that ballet. How did that feel, Marilyn? That must have been extraordinary. To
Yes,
think.
it was beautiful. It was a beautiful gesture, and Damien had just come out of the school. Then he was at the Australian Ballet School, my younger son, and he actually was on stage with me in one of the roles of the children. Yeah.
That's
So
extraordinary.
yeah. Stanton actually, neither of the boys started ballet. Stanton was 16 and a half, and Damien was 15 and a half. But they started, Stanton being at the age of 16 was like, he wanted to earn pocket money. So he asked if I could, I was no longer with the company, I was living in Sydney, and Garth and I had our own ballet school there. And he asked if I could get him speak to the wardrobe master, Johnny Langmaid, about being a dresser for the Australian Ballet when they were in Sydney. So I said, sure, I would ask. And so Johnny said, yes, fine, because Johnny looked after him as a baby in wardrobe when he was like, at 3 months, 6 months old, So, so Stanton went and was dressing the boys and was watching on side stage. And then he came home and said, Mum, I'd love to start ballet. So I was like, 16 and a half. So, I said, sure. He went up and saw the headmaster, blah, blah, and he took to it like a duck out of water. And he was choreographing 12 months later. I mean, really good. I was so impressed. And then he won a scholarship to go to San Francisco. He chose San Francisco Ballet School. And he went over there and he asked if Damien could take over his job as dresser when the company was in Sydney. So Damien went, and then he came home and said, "Mum, I want to start ballet." And Damien was, I was like, "Oh my God, would he last?" Because, but he did. And he went to the Australian Ballet School, and he became a principal dancer of the Australian Ballet Company. So both boys, but they weren't pushed into it. It was their own decision. Yeah.
One of my best memories of Damien, when I spent time also at the Australian Ballet as a media director, was arriving. He was a breath of fresh air. He would arrive, somebody would say, "Oh, excuse me, Jill," and someone would come whizzing past me on a skateboard. That was Damien. Yes, going to work at the ballet company on a skateboard, which is probably not recommended because dancers shouldn't take risks. But I love that attitude.
Well, Stanton, he became artistic director of this big company in Houston, and he didn't drive, so he rode a push bike to work as artistic director with his helmet on. He was like in this heat. But now he can drive. I think it got too much for him. So, yeah.
Have you had time for any hobbies in your life?
Not really. I mean, no, not what I mean. I like reading. I've tried a little bit of painting, but yeah, it's finding a subject to paint. That's what you know what I mean. It's like, yeah, I probably need. Yeah.
Well, what do you find interesting?
Movies.
Oh, sorry.
Movies. Yeah.
What do you find interesting in dance now?
I love it when I go and I know the people I'm watching. It makes a big difference.
Yes.
Actually, I'm really, because the last time I danced with the Australian Ballet was only a few years ago. It was not dance, but it was in Stephen Bain's piece. What was it called?
It was called Requiem.
Yes, and I played the role of the woman who's dying, and
it was a beautiful piece to
yeah.
Fabulous music.
And it was lovely to do. And my daughter-in-law, Kirsty Martin, she played my younger self actually in it.
Yes.
And so my grandson came to watch us, and we're driving home, and I said, "Did you recognise me?" He said, "Yes, Grandma. I couldn't recognise Mum though." I was like, "Great, that's going down well."
Well, Marilyn and Garth founded Australia's first dance dynasty, with the four of them all involved in ballet and in the development of the company. And the fact that Damien has married another principal artist, yes, and they have 2 children. So there's no other, this is the
My
first.
granddaughter learns ballet now.
Oh, does she?
Yes. Ballet and jazz.
So how big a place do you think dance holds in your life now?
Because of this organisation, and because I go across, I haven't been well, but I normally go across to Houston twice a year if I can. So I actually know the company very well, and sometimes I coach some of the dancers in different roles, like if they're doing the Merry Widow, I coach some of the principals. So I've really got to know that company, and so I feel very, I like watching them rehearse and do all that. And the same with the Australian Ballet. I don't know as many now as I used to, but...
Do you have any advice to someone considering a career in dancing?
No, I'm not one of those people who say, don't do it. I think if you love something, do it, That's quite often you'll have a dancer that says, I'm not putting my son or my daughter through that. But they loved what they did, so why not? I guess I can't complain about my career. It was a great career, yeah.
And, the question most dancers try to avoid, what do you consider your favourite ballet?
Well, yeah, probably Romeo and Juliet.
It's a pretty special ballet.
Yeah. Cranko's Romeo and Juliet, sorry.
Yes.
John Cranko's Romeo and Juliet. Yeah.
Yes, the Queensland Ballet with Lise and Jone have just... they have just presented another version of Romeo and Juliet, which is pretty wonderful too. But the Australian Ballet has one choreographed by a South African, which actually the company in 1988 took to the Soviet Union and was a massive success. Everybody thought we were taking coals to Newcastle, so to speak, but it was a huge success because they hadn't seen refreshing choreography. Well, look, thank you so much. We could keep on talking, but thank you so much for your time today and telling us about your motivation and your life. And insights into it. Thank you very much.